I think we need to give it a minute or so for. There we go.
Hey, did we clarify his?
Yeah, Dufresne.
Yep. Okay. Ha! Winner. You owe me a beer. You owe me something.
Yeah. I'll give you a high five.
Just like Andy Dufresne from Shawshank Redemption.
That's what I told him too. He's like,
Yeah.
it's John Dufresne, and I was like, are you sure it's not like Andy Dufresne? You know, but I win that one. I don't know what you owe me, but you owe me something.
We get you Dr. Pepper or something.
Diet.
Yeah, I get the Dufresne all the time.
Awesome. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. If you like what we're doing and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. If you'd like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And then tonight's episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network. Be sure to check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearms-related.net. And the other show sponsor is the RangeBuddy.App. It's a collection of over 140 shooting drills, all sorted by the required target time and filterable by the skills worked. There's a virtual instructor component on there, integrated leaderboards and practice session trackers, so you can see kind of how your performance improves or progresses over time. We just rolled out the dry fire tool and tracker that has a shooter's metronome in there that makes it super easy for you to work on your splits and transitions if you like to use a metronome app for that. It takes all the beats per minute calculation out of all of that. You just enter your splits time, and it'll give you the audible tick at that interval. It's available on Android and iOS. It's the RangeBuddy app, so be sure to check it out. And then, so tonight's episode 91, we are joined by John Dufresne of Kinetic Consulting, and we're going to be discussing his Weaponized Geometry Course. So as we get into that, John, why don't you go ahead and start the episode off by letting our listeners know a little bit about yourself and what got you into the firearms training industry.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. So it started out actually very organic. Started out in the military, like a lot of dudes do. And while I was there, I got into competitive shooting and started shooting USPSA and IDPA and stuff like that. And it was introduced to me by Frank Proctor from Way of the Gun, or now Frank Proctor Shooting. And he mentored me for a few years through that time while I was still in the military. And anytime I was back from a deployment, it was very much go shoot with Frank. And it got me to love shooting and enjoy shooting and encourage myself to get better at it. And in that route to try and get better, I also found that I could help others get better. So Frank took me under his wing. I used to AI for him for a while, which is just like an assistant instructor and stuff, teach certain courses for him and stuff. And then as I got out of the military, I continued teaching, but I got into the security industry and I started teaching different things there. And that was a little bit more, that's a big rabbit hole of shenanigans, but really the shooting part was always like a passion. I really enjoyed teaching it, doing it. Like I still enjoy shooting. I shoot way too much probably. And from there, it continued on and became, it ended up being a business. So Aaron Cowan from Sage Dynamics brought me on as another teacher for Sage after I took a few classes with him, and he was like, "Who are you? And and what are you doing at my class?" And realized that I could help him teach in different ways. Ended up doing that for a few years, and still do every once in a while. We'll teach together. We're doing it at Shooter Symposium this year in Texas in April, I think it is. And Shooter Symposium is pretty fun, by the way, if you've never been. And from there, it's Kinetic Consulting was born. Prior to that, to do like consulting work for LE agencies and some federal agencies. And then it's just grown and grown, and I opened it up to like the civilian population, I think in 2018 or 2017. So I've been teaching for about 10 years now, on and off, and in a professional capacity or on my own since about 2017, with pretty much like not being supported by another business or job.
That's awesome, and that's a hell of a lineage to come up under, man. That's Frank Proctor and Aaron Cohen. That's awesome. Talk to us a little bit about the Weaponized Geometry Course, and how would it compare to, it's a single man structure clearing course. So I guess lead into that, and then I'd like to compare and contrast it to like a team or a multiple member kind of room clearing deal.
So weaponized geometry came up because most of us don't have team members, and if we do, they're called wives, and they're semi useless in that environment. So not speaking for everybody's wives, by the way, don't get mad. I trained my wife, but but if if you're like me and she does not go out on the range every week or weekend or dry fire or practice in general, then it's going to be semi-useless to have her. It'll just be a boat anchor that I got to drag around kind of thing. So it was born out of that, as well as a bunch of law enforcement agencies approaching me asking for like single officer response stuff, right? So between the two, like home defense or me get out of a situation with my family and do it safely, because that may be the circumstance too. Um, and single officer response to things all coincide in the same, I would say, like spectrum. So when it came to that, it was like, well, how do we go about that? In the military, I got to take a very interesting class that was one man through a counter surveillance course that I had to take for work, and it was interesting, and it had its quirks about it, but it had a lot of potential and a lot of things that I was able to like tweak and make useful for myself. And doing that for a civilian population made it really easy because we get to understand our area of operation most of the time. Most of it is easygoing until it isn't. And if it's your house, it's your casa, man. You know all the inches to it as long as you've been there for a while. So it was born from that. Now the course starts out as a conversation on science. So I like to talk about like behavioral science in that course. It really brings up a lot of questions, and it's like, well, why do I need to know that kind of stuff? Is most people's question to that. But what it is like if you understand like what us as humans do almost every single time, right? And it's natural for us to do it, like instinctual for us to do it, then we can learn how to use that to our advantage, because you're not going to like stop yourself from flinching or stop yourself from like doing certain things that people do naturally. But what you can do is after that happens is understand what you can do to counter it or to use it as a potential upside or positive. So in this class, like we start out with just talking about tactics, the principles of what we're trying to do, and really the concepts behind it. And you learn how to just clear rooms and clear spaces and clear complexities that you may not have experienced before. And then from there, the next day we add in a human element, right? An adversary that's just a 3D shooting and moving target now. There's no like dialogue, there's no scenario, none of that kind of stuff yet, because people I think need a little bit more of a train up or a crawl walk run to scenarios, if you ask me. I've been to plenty of classes where they're like, first thing we do, scenario. And you're like, that's cool to like test your abilities at that moment. But to teach others, it's very difficult to throw them right to the wolves and expect them to do certain things after a PowerPoint or something. So I like to go baby steps. So the first day is crawling, we're on paper, everybody's chill, we're laughing and joking, we're understanding new things, we're learning new things, we're practicing it. And then the next day is like, let's apply those things we learned, but with an adversary that's actually going to move, shoot, and be aggressive and things like that, but with no dialogue. So it's not like, stop, or I'll shoot. No, man, they're going to always be bad guys. They're always going to want to kill you, or they're just going to be nothing in their hands, and they're going to be a no shoot target. So, and that's kind of like the baseline understanding of the course. The Weaponized Geometry 2 is where we start throwing in scenarios, and I give you like a literal like, hey man, you're going into the gas station and to buy a pack of gum, and that's it. And inside I have role players, and they all have scripts, and they're all like talking and doing things and like dropping shit and like causing a ruckus to an extent, but in a more realistic fashion. And a gunfight's going to happen because it's a class, or something's potentially going to happen. So everybody goes in there like all like, but it ends up being really good. And there's multiple ways out of it. It's not like I set you up to always shoot somebody or set you up to always like give somebody commands or something. It's very open ended so that people have an option. And just like in real life, you have an option. If you don't want to get involved, and you could just back your way and moonwalk out of that situation and get into the bush, right? Like you could do it. You could Homer Simpson your way out of that thing. And I want to give those options because that's realistic, right? You may have that option. So that's Weaponized Geometry 2. We also do a low light portion of that. So the next day is all low light scenarios, which really cause kind of a ruckus for a lot of guys. When the lights go out, it's a little bit scarier. It adds a different complexity of using white light properly. And I think it's a really good, I don't want to say a kick in the nuts, but it's definitely like an eye opener. Like, I should be focusing on this in my training versus focusing on that new optic that just came out, or getting my grip stippled again. So there's other things that you could be doing to really make yourself better and more, I would say, like just overall an asset to like your family or the people around you in general. So that's what the class is about mainly. And it teaches you a lot, but it also, I think, it helps you learn from your experiences more than it helps you learn from me, like PowerPoint for you and throwing it up there. It really does offer a lot of availability there for you to be open-minded and like, man, I can solve this differently, or I can this would have worked in this situation better. And each after action with every single dude, we go through the goods, the bads, uglies, and really just try to like break it down. So I think it's a very functional course for all of us that carry guns every day.
What kind of gear do you run in this? Is this live fire, simunition? What do you use?
It's definitely not live fire. So it would only work for like a couple reps if it was live fire. But it's all done with UTMs. And UTMs are ultimate training munitions. And I provide all of them. So I get them through either LE or my own distributors that I go through to get them. And I bring all the guns. I bring all the mags. You essentially bring iPro for one of the days, and you bring a little bit of padding or protective gear for the next day. But I bring all the masks. I bring, a bunch of stuff for you guys. So it's literally an all-inclusive class. The only thing you got to do is get there.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if this was just something that you do in your local, you have a shoot house, or if this is a traveling deal. So, yeah, I could definitely see where live fire would be a problem if we ran scenarios that wasn't in the shoot house. So, what's your thoughts, John, on room clearing specifically? I know it's kind of somewhat of a specialty thing to do. Typically you say one scenario, you get home and your house alarm's going off and no one's in the house, and should the gun guy going in there and clearing houses instead of maybe calling the police and waiting, and talk a little bit about that, of like what would be the good reasoning and the options at why you teach room clearing.
So the option, or the reason I would teach it in general, is because it's not always like you don't ever get to choose where things start to happen for you. Right. So being able to understand the complexities of a structure and the geometry that has to be like circumvented or either, pushed through or understood, so that you understand like what you're getting yourself into and be the most advantageous in there, is why I like teaching it. And I think it's it's very functional, at least in the grand scheme of things. If you ever had to either clear to your kid's room, or you had to clear out of some restaurant or some building or office that you're in, right? Like you may be at work and just have to clear your way to an exit, right? Where some people are thinking about this as just, oh man, I got to find the bad guy. But it may be just you working your way out of a damn situation. Like, not my job. I'm just trying to get out of here. And whoever wants to follow me, come on, but you better hurry. So it could be up to that point as well. Now, as for the scenario you kind of brought up, where people bring that one up pretty often, where you show up, doors busted open, alarms going off or not going off, and it's just busted open, but nobody's home. Like the other car's not home with your family. Everybody's at school, and you're like, well, I don't know. Personally, I ain't going in there. It's not worth it, right? Like, there's nothing in that house that's going to be worth my life, right? They could be grabbing all the thingies they want, and I could be sitting outside and waiting. Now, as a Floridian, I have all the right to feel threatened by that and use lethal force, but is it worth it? Right? A lot of people don't think about the litigious stuff that you got to deal with afterwards, and all the cases that you've seen that deal with that kind of stuff is pretty cutthroat. So you have to think about these things before you put yourself into it. And your TV, or the jewelry in the house, or your other guns, they may not be worth you going in there and getting yourself killed, or like potentially by your own guns too, or even having to go in there and deal with that, because then your family is without a person that would be protecting them otherwise. So my choice in that kind of matter, even with my skill level and my confidence doing it, and I'd probably be fine. Um, I would prefer to, like, nah, I'll just call the police, have them bring 5, 6 guys, and y'all do it for me. That's your job. That's what you do for a living, right? I hope you remember what I taught you, and and go off and do your job. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm not going there by myself if I don't have to. Now, throw that around and change it up and do my little girl's bicycles, turned over at the front door, and the door's broken in, and I hear screaming. Well, there's nothing that's going to stop me from going inside, right? Like, I have now just become the train, and I'm going to mow everything down as I go through, right? Finding my little baby girl. So when you change up the scenario a little bit, I guess your solution to the problem changes drastically in different ways. So it's really like up to you to kind of grasp those concepts, understand, like, hey, worst case scenario, I got to go in. How do I do it? Well, cool. I do it in the safest manner, or I do it in a way I've practiced or trained before. But if I don't know any better, you're going to run into the house and you may walk right into the wrong thing. And you may think you're better than you think you are, because you've watched too many movies or something, right? Or you watch too many YouTube videos, and you think you know what you're doing until you've done it and you felt what it feels like to get shot at by a human being, even by UTMs, because your brain doesn't know really the difference. It knows you're not going to die, but you still act like you're going to die. So it's very interesting. I have a lot of videos of students going through runs and seeing their actions, and then afterwards they're like, oh, I didn't do that. And I just, like, boom, look at what you did. You did some weird shit here, and it was natural. It's not wrong. I'm not mad at you, right? But, like, what could you have done differently now that you're starting to learn? The other thing that the class does is inoculate you, right? So inoculation, or comfort with stress in those kind of environments, is very huge. Think about it, like, both of you guys shoot, right? And if you're supposed to shoot in front of students or people in general, and somebody whips out a timer and they're like, challenge, right? Let's shoot this drill at this time, this pace, and you got to beat this time, but you got to do it in front of 30 people that are watching you. You're gonna be a little stressed out, right? Especially if you're not comfortable with it, right? Where, like me, I compete on a regular basis. I also teach in front of, 10, 15 students at a time every couple days, it feels. And I'm very comfortable shooting in front of other people. So the feeling I get is different than the feeling you'll get, which will change the way that we actually shoot from when we are comfortable. Like when I'm comfortable, I shoot almost the same as I'm shooting on a normal basis because I've inoculated myself to it. I teach in front of students. I shoot in front of random people all the time. So as a person that does that, that's an easy task. So I want to be able to do the same concept or the same thing in that, self-defense situation, or that when my life is threatened in some way. I want my body to be like, hey, we've experienced this. Don't be scared. Do the thing. Right. And then I get into the mode, I put the switch on, whatever you got to do, your thinking hat, whatever you need at that moment to get in there and do the right thing. Versus the other way around. It's like, I've seen this in a movie. Leroy, and you just run in that room, so you don't know what you're doing at that point. You're guesstimating, or you don't have any repetitions understanding how that works. So it's very difficult for like the regular Joe to jump into those situations. Now they may do well because luck has a say, but they also may do terribly and get themselves killed, which we see all the time. If you ever watch these shootings that happen that are with untrained humans, right? Both of them are very erratic. They're shooting erratically. They're shooting without sights. They're just blazing rounds. They're getting hit and dying, but they don't know they're dying yet. Right? Things like that happen. The Brazilian ones are the most popular ones I see. So hope
The
that
other,
answers it.
yeah, it did. And the other, there's some terrible, I guess, less than good advice that's in the self-defense community when it comes to home defense stuff, right? Because it's typically shelter in place, don't go out there and seek out the bad guy. And I think that's great advice if you know that somebody has broken into your home and you've been able to secure yourself and your loved ones. But it's happened where, I've personally experienced the alarms going off at 2:00 in the morning. So we do that shelter in place deal. And it's like, well, is it an actual intrusion or did my dog knock over a glass? And it's like, APD is 15 or 20 minutes away. So what it's going to be me, my wife, my 4 kiddos just hanging out. And so it's been this area where it's like, well, most likely it's not an intrusion, right? Most likely it's the dog knocked something over and tripped one of the glass break sensors. So now I've been tasked with going to making sure that that's the actual case. And I'm like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. This is dumb. This could be very stupid. And I think that's a point that gets passed around a lot. Is it's a huge priority on sheltering in place, which is great advice, right? I don't want to take that away from it. That is good advice. But I think you also have to have the other skill set, because it is, you show up at work and the alarm's going off, right? And you know that you have people showing up, so you have to get in there and make sure that it's safe. You know, so it's one of those things that I think we need to caution ourselves. And it's I think how long have you been teaching the weaponized geometry course?
I want to say about 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a course that I think I personally would like to see this specific type of course offering kind of gain more mainstream popularity. I know Craig Douglas is recently his AMIS course, right? And that's geared towards single person. But between his and yours, I'm not aware of other like single person building clearing.
There's a couple. I know Brian Valise of SlyTac training. He does one. We're actually doing a joint course, which will be this course, but with shooting on the first day and medical, and like a combined like skill sets course in March in Texas. And then whatchamacallit, there's also Aaron Cowan has Citizens Response to Active Shooter. That's a very similar course. It's definitely a eye opener. I love teaching that class with him because it's a lot of funniness that happens. Like people are like, I'm ready for this, and then you make the chaos, and then the chaos happens, and people are like, I'm not ready for this. So it's really cool, really good eye opener course. Let's see. I want to say like Orion Group. I believe they do some kind of one man stuff. I'm not sure. I haven't been to it, so I couldn't speak on it. But I've been to their team-based stuff, and it was pretty good. I was pretty happy with the way they taught it. It was very similar to the way that I like it done, or I like to teach it. So it was good stuff.
Yeah, there's Clint Smith does it up there at Thunder Ranch too. They're out there. I mean, if you seek them, they're out there.
Mhm.
Also, right here in New Mexico, we have Nick Rians of Ghost Ring Tactical. He does a full live shoot house of clearing one person as well. So they're definitely out there. And thanks for that information. And absolutely, I want to tag along what Jeremy was going to say earlier. And he's exactly right. For us, specifically in Albuquerque, you don't know if the cops are going to show up. And if I come home and my wife is like, "Hey, I'm hiding in the house," and I hear something, well, best believe we're going in, right? So I've said it before, nothing's absolute, and we have to make sure that we understand what we're doing. One thing that I know, like we have these SIRT pistols, right? So my wife and I screwed around one night, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna let you go hide, turn all the lights out. I'm gonna come in and clear the house and see if I can find you and see if I can shoot you before you shoot me. And it's hard. It's really
Mhm.
hard because she knows the house already, obviously, right? She knows where I'm likely going to come through, which there's kind of a little bit of bias on that, right? But just trying to clear and come around corners and all that stuff when they're already hiding and they know somebody's coming in, it is a
Yeah.
huge challenge. And we're just playing with laser guns, right? The thought process of having an actual gun pointed at you and getting shot, it's difficult. So I can definitely see the benefit and the value of having the ability to say, hey, this is what I need to do before I go in and try to John Rambo with no experience. So it makes plenty of sense to me.
Well, that and
Um,
having an actual adversary, right? Like having an actual adversary is always going to add a different factor versus like just shooting paper, because paper's never gets to jump on you. Paper's never going to win. Paper's not going to hurt you. And if it does, and it like comes off that board and starts flapping around and come after you, you just get the hell out of that house. Like something's wrong. Um, so any of those kind of things, you want an adversary. I want an adversary to be there to validate that I'm doing the right thing. And I also, that's what I like about the class is like your fellow students are your adversaries at certain points. So they know the tactic, they know what's happening, they know how to like do everything and counter what you're doing. But if you do it right, you can still win and you can still get hits on it and you can still fight the hardest person you'll ever fight, which is the person that knows you're coming, knows your tactics, and is already ready for you, you know? So it's actually really cool to see like people pick it up and do a really good job even within a day and a half or so of class. And they're absorbing this information. What I find is like, and this should probably be something we bring up too in the class or for the class. Um, Guys come to that class and they think they're ready most of the time. And what I find is like if you don't have your shooting skills to a certain level, right, being that you're comfortable shooting and you don't have to like think about your grip, you don't have to think about finding sights, and you could just do them in a subconscious manner. If you can't do that, you're probably not ready to do any kind of building tactics. And the reason for that and why I say it, and it's not to be mean or like belittle anybody or make them feel bad or whatever. It's to give you like a realization that like, cool, like you have the rest of your life to get yourself ready then. You know what I mean? Like it ain't the end of the world just because I said like you probably shouldn't come. It's you should go and practice and become more proficient with shooting. That way that factor of shooting in general, right? And the grip sights trigger stuff isn't a factor when you have to go against a human, because they're gonna dictate everything. They're gonna dictate the time, the place, the how bad the situation can be, right? And if I'm still thinking like, oh man, I hope my grip is good, like, or I'm trying to get a good grip, or I just negate it and I have a bad grip, then the chance of you hurting somebody that you're not supposed to hurt is really high, especially if it's your family or you're in a public place and there's other people's little kids running around, right? Like there are certain things that are worse than death, right? And hurting somebody else's baby, I couldn't do it. You know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna live much longer after that. It's not worth it to me because I know for a fact that baby's parents in whatever way are gonna want my soul, right? And I'll give it to them because like, bro, I fucked up. You know what I mean? So I'm not willing to let that happen or be that person that lets that happen. So I'm going to train myself to the extent, because I'm trying to be the least selfish person out there, right? I want to be so selfless that I'm willing to run up to a dude that's using a little kid as a fucking shield and put my muzzle against his face, even though he may shoot me multiple times, right? Because I'm not willing to shoot that little girl or take the chance of shooting that little girl. You know what I mean? So that's the way I look at it. And if it's necessary, I'm going to do so, right? If it ain't, I ain't going to do so. So like, people need to kind of think about things a little bit more realistic when it comes to this. It's not all hunky dory at the end of the day. Like, you go home and like walk in, you put your gun down, you're like, babe, it was so fucking hard, I had to shoot some dude in the face. Like, no, like, you're probably gonna be sitting in a cell, chilling, waiting for your dang lawyer, doing all sorts of other things, right? You got to deal with potentially killing a human being, which for some that's a harder concept, right? And then if you hurt the wrong person, bro, like, are you sure you're okay with that? Right? Are you sure you can live with that? And honestly, like, if you kill my little girl by accident because you're the negligent one that didn't train enough to potentially do the job, then guess who's coming for you, right? And I'll let you know. But I got a lot of skill sets, and I'll be using them at that point. So that's the way I look at things. So I don't want that for myself, right? I don't want to have somebody having to come hunt me down. So I want to do the best I can to prepare myself in a way that I won't ever have to deal with that, right? Or potentially ever deal with that. Chances are still there.
What are some of the more challenging aspects of this course for students?
Mostly it's, I think, the concept of putting together the solving problems, right? And then dealing with another human inside the structure. So like clearing a room, right? If I give you one room, it's very easy. You just do what you need to do to see inside that room the best you can from every angle possible. But if I give you more complex rooms, so a room that leads into a hallway that leads into another room, that room leads into the hallway in another area, and then it wraps around to another room, or anything in that form where it's a non-linear problem. So it's not just straight line. I gotta go through this, which that's really easy. And most houses aren't like that. You walk in through somebody's front door and it opens up in multiple directions, right? Sometimes it goes upstairs, sometimes it goes deep, sometimes it goes left, deep, and upstairs at the same time. And you may have multiple problems that you have to deal with. So it's dealing with that, knowing that there's an adversary in the house, causes all sorts of things to your brain. So it starts out with just indecision, right? Like you sit there and you're like, oh shit. Now, if you've never experienced it before, it's even more like longer of a pause that you sit there and you're like, well, which way first, right? And you have to decide this. The guys that have more experience doing it, they're usually like, well, this is a shitty spot. Let me just choose a direction, right? Or look for stimulus and other things. So if they're able to like correlate the problem and like understand like it's a shit sandwich and you have to kind of figure it out the best you can based off of the circumstances, then I'm going to try and do that first. But a lot of guys can't put that into terms before understanding, like, they're scared of the human that's inside the house that they know is there because of the class, right? And even if you didn't know they were there and I told you they were there, like, you'd probably act the same way. So there has been times where I add a role player or two into the class or into the run, and I'll sneak them in so that the person playing good guy doesn't just count bad guys and just go willy-nilly at the end. They're like, oh, I saw 3 dudes. That's how many came in here. But I may have snuck in a 4th and a 5th. And those kind of things get people a lot because people game it a lot. So if you don't game it too much, right, you start to understand that I'm going to have an adversary. I need to understand how to like keep my brain in check, and then understand how to solve the problems, which I teach you. Everything becomes way easier, but you have to be able to correlate all those things. Otherwise it becomes a little bit of a pain.
With regards to single man tactics and building clearing or room clearing, is there much difference between what you would train a law enforcement officer on versus a civilian, or is it kind of overlap pretty much?
So it's almost the same. If it's like single officer response to something, and he's not getting backup for a little while, and he's by himself, it'll pretty much be the same thing. The only difference, I guess, would be that they can radio that they're making entry and where they made entry. And if they're smart enough, they'll leave like a chem light or like a glow stick kind of thing at the front door and mark where they've entered, so that when their partners get there, they're like, "Hey man, he came in through here. It's marked. This is what he said on the radio. So he's in here. Be careful, because we're going to be coming up, excuse me, behind him." So other than that, and the potential blue on blue stuff, right? Like a friendly on friendly stuff, you want to pretty much the same way, or it would be the same way as a civilian based class. I don't teach different things for cops. Everything you come to my classes, whether it's an LE class or not, the only reason it's an LE class is because it's at an LE like range or shoot house, and they don't allow civilians to train there. That's really the only correlation there.
And is it predominantly a handgun course, or are we doing rifle tactics? And
So it's all handgun. It's the easiest one for me to travel with and bring, and then everybody carries a handgun. Not all of us like have a folded AR in a backpack or something. So if you do have one and you wanted to see like how it's done with a rifle, I have no like reservations against teaching people how to do it with a rifle, but the course is going to be done with a handgun. So I could still teach you the same stuff, and there's minor things that are different with a rifle.
that makes sense. How's the class evolved over the last 5 or 6 years?
Well, it started out as a one-day course that I realized very quickly that it needed 2 days. And then it was one of those kind of things where I was like, man, I don't have enough time, and there's more that I want to teach or learn. And then the other thing was my studying on human behavior and neurology got into it. And most people don't know this, but I'm one of those really nerdy people that used to go to school with like a pencil and a piece of paper folded up in my pocket and my skateboard, and I used to get straight A's. And it was just easy, like it was public school stuff, so it was very easy to understand what was going on. And South Florida's schools aren't that good anyways, but either way, it was really easy. But I like to nerd out on a lot of stuff, so science being one of them. Ophthalmology is another one, right? Neurology is another one, and the science of human behavior, like sociology and stuff like that, I think is really interesting, and how they all play into shooting is really interesting if you're willing to sit there and listen to all the nerdy stuff. And so what I've done is, over the years of taking courses and learning about the whole way our brain works as much as I can, at least at this level, and not have like my PhD and work in a lab and stuff, without being that far into it, I've tried to narrow down as much as possible that is useful for us to know in a class like that, as well as just as a shooter. So any class you come to that I teach, we usually go over a little bit of nerdy stuff. I'm very much into that, and I think it explains a lot of stuff that people try to explain out with, like, well, we've always done it this way, right? But that way is not the way our eyes work. Why would you do that? Different things like that. So it's very interesting to see. And between that and my handgun class, if you could do all three in succession, so my handgun mechanics class, weaponized geometry 1 and 2, all of them in succession, I think you'd get a lot out of it, in the sense of like, man, you learned how to shoot, you spent some time practicing, you got good at shooting, came to weaponized geometry, you learned how to deal with structures and problems and people and how you act when that happens. Then you took some time to practice that. Then you come to weaponized geometry 2 and you apply it all in a scenario based environment. And then we add low light into it. And so it all stacks on top of each other in a way that the curriculum almost like finishes with handgun and starts with weaponized geometry. So you could take them back to back, but it would behoove you to practice in between and put some time into it more than just taking class after class.
You just answered my next question. I was going to ask where the course should fall on a student's continuum of training, right? Is it I got my concealed carry license, not in Florida, right? Because that's you fire one round into a bucket of water or something down there at a gun show,
Yeah.
and then you get your deal. You mentioned earlier, it's more beneficial for students to have their skills squared away. Are you looking do you have any set prerequisites or a minimum skill set that a student should have or must have before attending the course?
Honestly, like the only prerequisite I put on it is that they're safe with firearms and they're not brand new. Because brand new shooters aren't going to be safe yet or understand how to apply these skills that have to do with shooting. And that's the prerequisites I put on it. It's for you to realize, like, hey, I'm good enough or not good enough. Because honestly speaking, like, unless you've been to like classes with me or shoot with me recreationally or any of those kind of things, I can never tell you that you're good at something until you've proven it, if that makes sense. So I've had guys who are grandmasters at USPSA come to class and mess it all up, shoot the wrong person, do the bad things. And that same dude actually came back a second time, the second time I came around his area, and then did fantastic. And it was only because he applied the things he learned from messing it up and used it as a learning lesson to correct himself and come back and do it better. The shooting stuff that he had wasn't anywhere near the issue. He was a very good shooter. Obviously, he shoots well, but all he had to do was apply it into the tactics and the environment that we're playing with. And once he learned to do that and solve the problems, everything was easy. So he went. I think it was an entire day, which was the second day of the class, against adversaries and never got shot. Right? Not when he was playing good guy. When he played bad guy, obviously he got shot and stuff. But that's one of those things that like it gave me joy to see, because the first time he was just a shit sandwich, right? He would go into things, he would expose himself too much, he would bring his gun up way too high up into his eyes and not be able to PID certain things, right? Or ID like the actual adversaries. So he shot some no shoots, which was funny for me to watch, not for the guy getting shot that didn't expect to get shot. But it was definitely enjoyable because the second time he came around, it was just like I was like rooting for him and sitting back there like enjoying myself watching him do such a good job, because he knew what to expect. The scenarios and the layouts and everything were different, but he was able to apply the same skills into that. And that's what I try to give you guys as shooters, right? I want to give you guys the building blocks so that you can fill in the blanks. It's not like, well, this is how you do it every time. It's like, here are the options for these circumstances. Here are the common issues. Now I'm going to throw you into the ringer and we're going to play around with it. And you guys will solve it for what you can do, right? Because some people's bodies don't work the same as others, right? Like, man, I'm really flexible. So like different things I can do may not work for somebody else that's inflexible or has injuries like hip or back or knee or neck injuries that'll cause them to be inflexible in some ways. So little things like that and finding the tweaks to it. I think I find a lot of like alterations to my things that I teach, just because a little bit of a problem solver. I like puzzles. And when I get somebody that's like a problem in that way, I'm like, man, how do I solve this? Right? I get all excited. I'm like, oh, how can they do this differently? So between all that, like it's impressive to see, but it's kind of up to you to kind of give yourself the okay to know that you're ready for it. If you've been shooting for 25 years, that tells me nothing, because you could have been doing it wrong for 25 years. And I've seen some guys that have been shooting for 25 years and they suck the second you put a little bit of pressure on them and it's not in front of a bench on a piece of paper straight ahead at 5 yards. So there's a lot of differences when it becomes a person and the environment becomes really open. So just something to think about. And when it comes to people trying to get into this kind of stuff, uh, it needs to be you that kind of ultimately gives you the okay.
Are you, as far as like the student body makeup goes, are you seeing a lot of competitive shooters? Is it more defensive minded guys or LE folks that are showing up to this class?
It's actually a pretty even mixture. So I've had classes which were really heavy LE, and then I've had classes that were heavy civilian. I've had multiple dudes that are civilians that think defensively, but also compete, and they compete at a high level. And I've gotten a lot of military guys too, like dudes that are like, well, if I had to do this by myself overseas, like how would I do this? And they're interested in doing it. So it's really cool to see. I get a lot of federal guys. They don't usually like get back up that easily. And it's really cool to see like the very high mixture of humans that I get. I even get down to like, the 16-year-old that came with his dad. And I have had a 15-year-old girl in my class who just kicked ass. Once she got over the fear, it was easy for her because she's tiny and she could hide really easy. And then I've had the dudes that are like, they feel like they're ready for it, and they're the whole I've been shooting for 15, 20 years or whatever, and they feel like they're accomplished. And at the end of class, they're like, John, I got a lot of things to work on, and that to me is it warms my heart that like they can understand that, hey, their skills aren't there yet, and they need to kind of keep working on things. So little stuff like that makes me happy, and it's one of those things I look for as a teacher isn't to like for a perfect student. Like a perfect student's not the guy I'm looking for to help, right? He's got shit done. He's good. I may have to be able to push him a little bit, but other than that, he's on a good standing. It's the guys that have trouble that I can either encourage, or the guys that are closed-minded that I can open up. And like those kind of people I really look for, because like that's the challenge I want as a teacher, right? I don't need the guy that knows this stuff. I don't need you that knows the answers, kind of thing. Not that it wouldn't be wrong to have you. It's always nice to have a guy that has a lot of skill, because then it's like, what do you think? What did you do this time? Teach the other guys what you're thinking, because it may be different from what I'm thinking. Because everybody in class can teach something, right? So I'm a really big fan of it, and I think it's a lot of fun to see like the different variety of humans that come to classes, whether it's weaponized geometry or any of the other ones.
Nice. We had a question from one of our viewers. John asks if your skills on demand with Slide Tech in Texas, if it has some of your weaponized geometry concepts. And I know you touched on it in the beginning, but you want to touch on that again
Yeah.
for him?
Yeah, so the skills on demand, it'll be a pretty fun class. So it starts out with a day of pistol. It'll go into the night, and we'll go over medical. The place has lodging in Dilley, so we can all like lodge together in a big barracks area and chillax, have fun, and talk, and still do classes up until really late. And then the next day will be very much putting into the weaponized geometry stuff and one man stuff. And then the last day will be scenario based. So giving you medical based scenarios or shooting based scenarios and things like that. So really just throwing your skills and demanding those skills to be like produced right there on the spot. So a lot of learning stuff, but a lot of like come prepared to be tested, if that makes sense. And for those that don't know Brian from SlyTac, Brian he used to be a centrifuge instructor for Will Petty. He's a solid dude. I love Brian. He's also one of those guys that like goes out. Like I've been a student in class with him in somebody else's class. So he takes quite a few classes like I do every year to like either brush up on new things or understand new concepts, or even just like, hey man, like I like this thing. Let me go check it out. So he's been in a couple of my classes over the years, and it's been cool to have him. And now being able to teach with him is even more exciting. So highly recommended.
I want to talk a little bit about the availability for folks to host this course. Is this something that you're able to travel to do, set up, and what would the requirements for that be?
So for any of my classes, there's a hosting tab on the website so that you can see all the requirements. But for weaponized geometry, I essentially need a structure. It doesn't have to be a shoot house, but it has to be something that can get like can take holes in the walls and paint. Um, so it needs to be a structure that's more complex. It can't be just a single family home that's not big. Like if you got like a, a 5,000 square foot home or whatever, we could probably make that work. But like a standard like 1,500 square foot single family home is probably going to be too small. It's not complex enough. Usually it's a little too easy. So I want things that I can make hard for you, because I like to turn up the heat really quick when it comes to these kind of things. A shoot house is even better, because then I know shoot houses, I can move walls, I can change doors up, I can do a lot of stuff like that, which is even better. But that's essentially what I need, that and a student base to do it. And I bring literally everything else.
What's the most challenging part for you as an instructor in this course?
The time management, right? Because it's one man, that means one person goes at at a time. So I need to make the runs that they have to do, or the rooms they need to clear, complex enough to give them a challenge and let them learn, and also not make them so complex that it takes us 45 minutes a person, because that'll eat the entire day. So I'm trying to get you like 3 or 4 runs in throughout the day, and you get to observe other students going. So that's another learning point as well. But it isn't until the second day where now I have 4 people doing things and only a little bit of the class outside. And that's why I cap the class at 12 people, because otherwise I just don't have enough time. So usually every weaponized geometry class has a capacity of 12. And it's literally just because I don't have enough time in the day, and it's still a 10-hour a day course. So it's not like an 8-hour course in any way. We start early and we end late. And sometimes it even goes later, because I teach until completion of my curriculum. I don't teach to a time frame. And some people need to go and stuff, which makes sense. But otherwise, we go until Duffy's done teaching.
When down the line, when you hang it up and you retire, hopefully that's a ways away. What are some things that you hope to be remembered for in the industry?
I hope it's not my cookie habit, right? Like, I like me some cookies. But I hope that I make an imprint on at least my fellow instructors and my teachers out there. Because one of the things I really encourage, even to like my partners in crime, my peers, is to go out and seek more, right? Like, seek more information. A lot of guys get stuck in this rut of like teaching the same thing over and over, and they get burned out really fast. And it's because they repeat the same thing over and over and over. No 2 classes that I ever have, even the same subject, are ever the same. Whether I teach it at the same place, same time of the year, same students, it'll still be a different class. Because I constantly keep my curriculum as like a living document. Every time a class is over, I go through it and I'm like, man, maybe I'll switch this around. Maybe I'll do this differently. Maybe I should mention this way. And I really go through and edit all my stuff every single class. And I think that's what a true teacher should do. Your curriculum is never done, right? It's never set in stone. It should never be in a binder that you got to read out of, right? It should be a constant evolving thing that lives. And if I can encourage like other teachers to be that way, we'd probably have a lot better classes out there to take. You'd also see a lot better student bases versus some of the bullshit that comes out, where I'm sure all of us have seen it, where it's the whole, hey, we always do it this way, so that's the way we're going to do it. And it's like, those things don't work with me, because our world evolves, right? Like, I say it all the time. Don't marry your tactics and don't marry your equipment, right? Like, gear and tactics should not be married. Like, I'm married to them, right? I'm dating them at best, right? And if I see something shinier that I want to go play with, cool, I'll dump that one and I'll go play with that one and try it out. And if it doesn't work, cool, I'll go back. But I'm not married to it, like, none of it is my identity in any way. Like, just because I shoot Glocks doesn't mean I'm like Glock life forever, bro. Like, no, I've got a safe full of other guns that I shoot pretty easily. I prefer them, right? But if something new and shiny comes out that works better and is like Glock 2.0, sweet, like I'll try it. If it is, sweet. If it isn't, not worth my time. Right? I just go back to the other one, but I'm not going to marry one. Does that make sense? So that concept with the living document of curriculum, I think like those two things, I'm hoping are like my big things or my imprints on at least our community as teachers and stuff like that. And the same goes for students. Right? I hope to impact them in a way that they take what they're learning and they continuously try to evolve, because you'll never be done learning. Never. Right? Just because you get a certificate doesn't mean you know the thing. All of us have forgotten everything about high school, right? But you got a diploma, right? Those of you that went to college got a degree, you forgot that shit too, right? Like certificate doesn't mean anything. Maybe it's completion and that's it, but it's not, you know, the shit, right? So I kind of look at it like fitness, right? Like I don't just go to the gym and come back and I'm like, I'm fit now. Never again do I need to step in there or work out again. No, dude, I still got to get over there and do some pull-ups, right? Like I still got to do all the things to continue my fitness, continue my level of proficiency with a gun, right? It's a constant thing. And the visualization that I use for it is like, if you can imagine like a big tube of like green shooting skills, right? Like big goopy skills that like look like slime from like Nickelodeon back in the day, right? The second you go to the range, right, you start filling up that tube of skill. And once it reaches that pinnacle of the day, you're like, man, I'm feeling really good. I've been shooting really good. Heck yeah, let me go home. As you leave the range, that tube starts to diminish, right? And drain and drain and drain. And the longer it takes you to pick up your gun and dry practice or pick up your gun and shoot, you're never going to fill that thing back up. So if you take a month in between, expect to be at the bottom of your skill level at that point. Not that it's truly like that, because you could probably pick it up and be like, it's like riding a bike, but not everybody can do that. So that's why I'm like, I'm not one of those dudes that's like, well, I only shoot when I teach, or I only dry practice when I feel like I'm doing bad, right? Like, no, I try to do that shit every day and be consistent with it. Just like my fitness, try to be consistent with it, right? Like my health, I want to be consistent with it so that I don't deteriorate and I can withstand longer, essentially longer spouts of using it. So I want to be at the highest level all the time. Because once again, you don't know when things are going to happen for you. You don't know when somebody's going to come over and test your gangster, right? You have no idea. And if you did, cool, I probably wouldn't be there and I'd set a trap and like shoot him from like 600 yards away in the dark, you know? Like I'm not going to be there. Or I'm going to have a bunch of friends over, you know? It'll be a party at that point. So I'm not going to go into it by myself at that point. So if you got a crystal ball, man, let me know. I'd like to see that thing. But yeah, man, that's the way I kind of look at it. So for the teachers, I hope to imprint those kind of things. For the students, I hope to imprint those kind of things. And honestly, it's one and the same, right? Teachers are students and students are teachers, right? And they should be. So as you continue, like it'll never end.
What do you think the general big aha moment is, or the big takeaway for students after this course, if there is one or two?
I think one of the ones that I've heard before, like when we do the little after actions, and in the classroom, we'll all sit down. And it's like, what you guys like, what you guys hate, what you guys like, what would you like to see differently in class? And a lot of guys say that they would have liked, or sorry, that one of the biggest ahas are that they were either not ready for this kind of class and it was too much for them, and it's because they need to work on a lot of different skills, and that's always really nice because like then they go out and do that, and it's the same day that they leave that class that they email me, or they or I see like them sign up for another weaponized geometry next year. And it's really cool because they're already setting a goal and they're like, all right, by that next class, I'm gonna be prepared for it. So those kind of things are big ones or big takeaways from the class that I've seen. Like it shows you what you need. And then the other one is I've seen guys realize like I've had multiple like SWAT guys come through this course or military dudes with a lot of experience, and the majority of them explain they're like, I would have liked to know this before I knew team-based tactics, because it would have opened up my mind to understanding like one, how easy team-based stuff is after this, but two, like the complexities of the geometry we're playing in and how easy it is to like, man, if I had one extra guy, this would be sweet and this would be way easier. But if I could do it by myself, then having one extra guy is just a cherry on top of that cupcake versus the other way around where I always rely on somebody else. Now I don't have them. Now I ain't got a cupcake. So little things like that, I think, are the big takeaways I've seen on both spectrums of like goods and essentially bads, if you want to call them that, or hey, I need to go learn or practice more.
That makes sense. What are some of the big overarching differences between single man and team tactics?
So the first one is that you're by yourself. But no, the first one is as one man or as an only person in the structure, you have to do all the jobs. So those of you that have done like team-based stuff understand that there's like up to 4, 5, 6, 7 jobs that are happening at once, right? Depending on what's happening or how complex the structure is. Well, when you're one man by yourself, like you have to take up most of those jobs or position yourself in ways that you can see the majority of those jobs or hide yourself from some of the things that you can't take care of, or obscure yourself, really, not hide. So that's one of the biggest things. And then with the team-based tactics, like you have a lot of options, but it needs to be options that are like taught or SOP or some kind of thing that you guys all do together and you know how to feed off of each other. Where with one man stuff, you don't have to feed off of anybody or tell anybody what you're doing. And a team-based tactics, like you got to be like, I'm about to do this thing. You should know what to do because I'm doing this thing. And if I do a different thing, you should know how to counter that and do the different thing. So it's similar to like any kind of martial arts, right? You practice the martial arts, you practice the different ways of doing things and little drills that you do in between or katas and other things. And the reason for those is so that you can learn to counter the things when you start feeling them happening to you, right? Like I may not notice that he's getting ready to get an armbar, but if I start feeling what I know feels like him trying to get an armbar, or I start realizing it, I can already start countering it prior to. So versus the other way around, where oh shit, I'm in it, we're done. So so that kind of stuff will help you in the long run. But the the two different things where it's team based or single man is going to be big on like the things that you have to do, right? The jobs at the point. So one man, you got all the jobs. Team based stuff, you can share the jobs, but you have to know what the other guys are doing the whole time. So it's a lot of brain power.
No, that makes sense. Thank you. I know we're right at an hour and you're a couple hours ahead of us, so I don't want to keep you much longer. Is there anything that we should have discussed or we should have talked about with regards to the class or kinetic consulting that we haven't gotten to?
Not really. Like, I've actually tried, or I'm thinking about putting into a weaponized geometry, but a night vision version. So that's another variation to it that I'm thinking about doing, but we'll see. I already do like night vision tactics, but in a team-based environment versus single man. But I've thought about putting into a one-man version of that. So other than that, I think we've covered mostly everything. And if you're more curious about it or you wanted to know more that we didn't cover, or you have other questions, like I hope the viewers feel free to like email me. My email is right on my website, so any contact that goes through there goes to me. I'm a one-man show, so uh, I'll answer anything you guys need when it comes to it, and help people out.
Tell us what your website is for those that'll listen to the podcast and they're not going to see it quite on the video.
Yeah, so it's Kinetic-Consulting, firearms-related.net. And
Awesome.
and even if you just Google Kinetic Consulting, it pops up pretty easily.
Very good. I actually did that very thing. I was kind of scrolling through your website, looking around and checking it out. So you guys have a busy 2024 season already. It looks like around 40 classes or so. Kind of cool thing for us, as Jeremy and I have mentioned many times, we're here in New Mexico, and it looks like you're going to be down in Clovis, New Mexico in May for this very course. So if we play our cards right, we might be seeing you face to face and take this course and see what we can learn from you. So super excited about that.
Absolutely. And I'd love to hear like your feedback on it. And even doing maybe a version 2 of this podcast with after you guys have done it and your points of view on what we just discussed on it in this podcast versus after experiencing it versus just asking questions about it. I think you guys would enjoy it.
Awesome.
That's good. Who's hosting that down there? If you recall off the top of your head.
I'd have to look at my calendar. Give me a second. I usually save it on my calendar to make sure I remember who to contact when I have questions about the place.
That's cool. Clovis, New Mexico, huh? I don't even know how far Clovis is from us, Andy, but a couple hours, right?
Sorry, I was looking on the website too. Yeah, it's about 3 hours, 4-ish hours. It's kind of a little jaunt for us, but I mean, it's definitely driving distance, spending a weekend out there. So I'm sure it's the same gun store that hosts most of the people in Clovis. I've trained with a couple of them, really good guys down there.
So the guy that's hosting me is Ace Bowles or Boles. I don't know how he pronounces it. And he owns Blackwater Labs LLC, and it'll be at Southwest Shooting Center.
Sweet.
Awesome. The other thing I noticed too in November, being selfish now on the podcast, I noticed in November, I believe you're coming back to Clovis for an NVG. Is that law enforcement only, or is that civilian?
No, that's a civilian class. Unless it says LE in front of it, it's civilian class.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the second thing is I noticed that you actually have rentals too. Is that also part of the deal?
Yeah, so I have rentals on there on my website, and they're first come, first serve because I don't have a billion of them. But I do have 4 sets with helmets, with lasers, with everything that you would need. So if you're like night vision curious and want to learn before you buy kind of things, that's the best way to do it and the least expensive way to do it. Because if you buy some like NVGs from like AMG or something or AGM, I think it is, that commercial spec stuff, and you're unhappy with it, that's like the worst way to do it. Spend $7,000 and get crap. So something to think about.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting to think about having the opportunity to do that. Jeremy's some kind of curious, but I don't know if it's NVG curious for me. You know, I think I might look into that class too. So I need to start saving my money.
Yeah, I teach a lot of night vision stuff over the year. I literally just did one today for a SWAT team nearby, and so it's one of my bread and butters of one of my classes.
Man, that's exciting. I will hopefully Andy and I can be in that class together. It has not worked out yet. Where Andy and we have signed up for several classes together, and something always happens. We signed up for a match in January, and I'm hoping that Andy can come and shoot it.
Nice.
But it'll be I don't know if I'm the jinx or if Andy's. I think I am the jinx, right? Because you have no problem getting to training courses if you're rolling solo. But it's any time that I sign up to take a class with you that something happens. So
I'm just really,
what you do is you sign up for the alternate class, and then the day before you sign up for the other one.
I just, I don't want to shoot with him because he'll look bad, and then I have to hear it, and all those things.
I get my feelings hurt.
He gets feelings.
Honestly,
hurt,
that's one of my favorite things to do is go to classes with friends. You get to a lot of banter back and forth and push each other to get better. So it's not a bad way of doing it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. The industry, believe it or not, and we've talked about this also before. The industry is actually really small. The training junkies you see in the same classes all around. I mean, I went all the way to Georgia, took a class, and ended up right here in my own hometown with Tim Herron. And it's like, hey, Martin, hey, Dan, hey, how are you guys doing? So it's pretty common, and the more you do it, the funner it gets, because then a lot more people end up becoming your friends. So I totally agree with that. But
Yeah,
John,
like
it was a great.
if you don't have friends, go to classes. You'll make friends.
Yeah, you might.
Or
If you do
download the
stupid
range,
stuff.
yeah, or download the RangeBuddy app, and you can shoot solo and have fun.
It is
And
your
you don't have
friend.
to talk. And you don't have to talk to him either. That's even the best part.
That's my favorite part. Andy, I cut you off a minute.
Yeah, no worries. John, it was a pleasure having you on the show tonight. It was really exciting. It's another one of those where it's like the conversation went so well between you and Jeremy. I was just sitting back watching the show and learning so many things. And it just got me super excited about this when I went over to your website and I was like, let me start looking at, he's coming to Clovis. So yeah, hopefully we can work that out and be out there and take that class. And then absolutely, we'd love to have you back again. Anytime you'd like to come on and guest with us too, feel free to reach out.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Be happy to.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. We appreciate you jumping on and spending your evening with us. Remember, it's your life. It's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. We'll see y'all not next week because it's Christmas. So have a Merry Christmas. We'll see you in a couple weeks.